Internet, and welcome to another episode of the Chase Travis Live Show here on Creative Live. Hopefully, you know the show by now. This is where I sit down with the world's top creators, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders, and I do everything I can to unpack their brains with the goal of helping you live your dreams in career, hobby, and in life. I am over the moon with our guest today. Before I get to her, just a little bit of housekeeping. I want to welcome you from whatever platform you're viewing on, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube Live. We stream to a bunch of them, and let you know that if you are typing in the comments, I can see those comments and questions, and I will do everything I can to elevate them to our guests so that this can be an interactive experience for you all. And I also will put a little asterisk in there, which is the place where I see those questions first is at creativelive.com/TV. So if you're watching on a bunch of different platforms and you want to go there to make sure your question gets seen first, that's the way to do it. But I know you're not here for my housekeeping. You're here for our guest today, Julia Turshen. Amazing woman. She is a best-selling cookbook author of a bunch of books, Small Victories, which was named, if I'm not mistaken, I think the best cookbook or cookbook of the year or something from the New York Times and NPR. Also Feed the Resistance, the Eater's Book of the Year 2017. Now and Again, another best-selling cookbook, one of the best in 2018, named by Amazon. And her latest, Simply Julia, which I have right here, is a barnstormer. Today is the launch, or yesterday rather was the launch, and so it gives me great pleasure to welcome Julia. Please tap on your desk, raise the roof, and get your fingers ready to type some questions as we have Julia on the show. Julia, welcome, and thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you and about just, all the creativity that goes into this work. And I have no idea what day it is. So I'm also realizing we're matching, which was not planned. We didn't.
Hey, how about that? Well, we have people tuning in from all over the world.
Cool.
We're already I've got an Italy. This person they're interested. They're here for the food.
Awesome.
We've got a New Jersey, a New York, Southern California. Be more specific. Give me a city. Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm looking for our international. Dublin, Ireland. Ali, Wheels and Warriors, Hacken. Nice to see some familiar faces in the show, in the audience today. And so, Julia, the folks want to know, first of all, backstory, because there's a great little line in the longer bio and some of the research that I have read about you. And again, we share a bunch of mutual friends. We can talk a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah.
But it says something like you skipped the easy bake oven as a young person and went straight to the real thing. So this has been in your soul, it sounds like, for a long time. I'm wondering if you can take us back.
Sure.
To how you got started, because so many people, they're like wandering in the wilderness right now trying to figure out what they want to do with this one precious life, and hearing origin stories is always a great place to start, and it helps orient our audience.
Sure. Yeah. Something I admire about the work you do on your show is like sharing all this like very practical stuff that comes with creativity, because it can be hard to describe. And I wish I had some moments to share with you about becoming interested in food, getting involved in the kitchen, but I really don't, because I don't remember ever not loving to cook. I mean, since I was such a little kid, and the easy bake oven thing, I mean, is true. Like, I have been in the kitchen, like the adult real kitchen, since before I can remember. And I think that is just something I'm very lucky. I can't really ascribe that to anything in particular. It's just sort of this innate interest and curiosity and passion. I do think there is something hereditary. My mom's parents, who I never met, ran a bread bakery. I feel like there's something there. On my dad's side of the family, my great-grandfather ran a flour mill. So I feel like there's like gluten in my DNA.
Gluten in the DNA. It's one of the strands, right?
But
it's a noodle.
Yeah, exactly. Like literally. But I think another thing that really just set me up for the career I have for, living a life that is, I mean, you can see is quite literally surrounded by books, is both my parents worked in publishing. So I grew up in a home, specifically the magazine business. So I grew up in a home where I saw my parents, making pages with images and words, like assembling them. Like my parents would, I'm not that old, but like on the weekends they were cutting things out and pasting them. That's what they continue to do. So I was exposed very early on to printed media, to printed matter. I saw that these books and stuff that, I love and that I now make, they're not just things that appear. Like there's people whose jobs it is to make them. So yeah, I cooked forever and I studied um, English as well. And I was an English major in college. And I actually studied poetry, which I'd be happy to talk more about if you'd like, because I think it informs a lot of my cookbook writing. So that's kind of the path. And then I worked with a bunch of people and have gotten to do my own books too. So yeah.
Well, part of the
Wow.
poetry.
The time.
Oh, sorry for interrupting you there. There was a little lag. The poetry part of your backstory, I think, is interesting because one of the things that I noticed immediately when I got your book is, sort of the inclusion of the personal essays and photos from your life that go beyond just recipes. I know it says like the sub here is 110 easy recipes for healthy comfort food, but it's the sort of the intertwining of your life story, and the personal POV to me, which
Mm,
sucked me in way beyond most of the cookbooks that
mm,
I'm familiar with. So was that part of, the part of what makes you different is your background in poetry and maybe English literature, or, why the decision to include those things? For me, it's made a lot of the difference. Like it sucked me into the book,
mm.
but for what reason
Yeah.
did you do that?
Yeah, that's a question. I mean, I think, my background in studying poetry and stuff, I don't know if it sets me apart. I mean, but I know that it helps me just look at the world very closely. I think, I don't write poems that much anymore. Every now and then I do, but that is not my career, but it is definitely like an identity I
Mm.
identify with because I think if you are a poet or you're just someone who likes poetry, it just means you're paying attention to details and you're kind of like looking at things in that way. And that's very much what I do as a cookbook author. And in terms of incorporating all the personal writing that's in this book, I mean, this is definitely my most personal book yet. And for me, that's what I love most about my favorite cookbooks. There is like such a clear voice. You do feel like that person is with you in the kitchen. And it's why I have been interested in food my whole life and continue to be interested in it. I love food. I love to cook. I'm happy to talk about like whatever recipe you want, but it's it's not about the food, but it's not. It's about all the stories that come with it. It's all the feelings that come with cooking and eating, all the interactions I've had with people, over meals and in the kitchen. It's the stories that matter to me just as much, if not more, than the food. Just as much. They're both important.
Yeah, of course. Well, it's like one is necessary but not sufficient. You couldn't have a cookbook without food, but to me, it's the part of the sufficient, like what makes this especially this recent book so special is the interconnectedness, and it's sort of like food. The way that we talk about creativity on this show is not just art. Creativity with the capital C. If you
Mhm.
if you widen the aperture of what creating does, whether it's building a business or painting or co-creating this conversation right
Mhm.
now. If you just think of it with capital C, I think you've done the same with capital F, food. Like it's a mechanism around, around convening people. It's cultural connections, and those are so many things that I will want to get to. But before we do, you said a couple things in your description of your early life, and you started in a grown-up's kitchen. You skip the easy bake stuff. And there are people right now, and I'll just refer to some of them. There's Charlene and Soul and Hakan and Allie and Susan and Wheels and Warriors and Allie, that if I know our listeners and watchers, they probably didn't have this sort of what seemed to be like a free and open and encouraging household,
Mhm.
which to be brought up in, where that was steering you to pursue your dreams. Now, I could also be um, mistakenly overlaying what I heard onto your actual life, and maybe there's a gap between what I'm describing and what wasn't. But if you felt it from your earliest time that it was in your bones, was that part of the family? And if so, fantastic. But what advice would you give someone who didn't have that and
Mm.
is trying to pull on the threads and and understand a little bit about how they want to spend at least the working part of this one precious life they had.
Sure.
Do you have any advice for those listening and watching?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the I don't know, sensitivity you're expressing in this question too. And you know, I'll say that I have felt and continue to feel so supported in my life by my family, by my friends who I consider my family. Like that has been a through line in my life, and I understand what a privilege that is, and how much I wish it wasn't a privilege. Like I wish that was just a given. So I just, I appreciate how you said that. And yeah, for anyone who has any creative interest, any particular passion, whether it's food or whatever, music, painting, talking to people, like conversation. Um, yeah, if that wasn't clear to you early on, or maybe it has been, but you haven't gotten that support, if there is some roadblock there of any kind, I mean, that's hard. And I think just acknowledging that that's hard is,
Yeah.
step one. And for me, something I think about a lot, I actually have it like written down on my desk.
Ooh,
You can't see it.
ooh,
I'm
tell me.
surrounded by notes, and something I wrote down for myself that I look at every single day is, I don't know if someone said this to me or I thought of it, but the long game is the short game just over and over. And what I mean by that is like all we have is our day-to-day life. And I think often, I don't know, I'd be curious what your thoughts are on this, but I just think creativity gets romanticized so much. If I'm talking about food, it's like, oh my God, this beautifully laid table and the organic, artisanal, authentic, and on and on. I dug these carrots myself and all of the stuff. And I mean, that's wonderful. Like, I'm all for it. But it becomes, in a way, like the idea of the thing and not the thing itself. And I just feel like the more, I don't know, aspirational creativity seems, the more romanticized it seems. Like the further we get from just the day to day making of things and thinking about things, I think we forget that we're making decisions about how we're spending our life. And so, I just really, if you're not getting the support you need, I think figuring out if it's, I guess, worth it. Like, are you doing something that are you enjoying it? Like, is the price of making some wonderful creative thing, is it causing you to lose sleep or to be, more stressed, or, these kinds of things? And I think figuring out how to make these things work in your day-to-day life and just really assessing what is most valuable to you. And, for some people that includes spending a lot of time on social media and engaging, and that can be really fun and positive. And for some people that's a terrible thing. Like,
Right. It can be
so I think
toxic and
just
negative.
checking
Yeah.
in. Yeah, I think checking in with like, okay, I have this big idea, this big creative idea, but like, what does it mean on a day-to-day level? And maybe from me, that's because I write recipes for a living. Like, I love breaking things down to the elements and just like, how do we make the thing? Like, not just the idea. So yeah, that's something I just think about a lot. I don't know if that totally
No,
answers your
oh,
question.
but that no, that's there's so much wisdom in there. I remember when you were talking, it conjured up a video I made one time after having, done a live call for the podcast. Someone was talking about how, they have all the stuff. They've got the latest camera and they've
Mhm.
got a script and, they've they've basically stacked all the things to do the stuff around themselves, but they haven't actually taken the step to the
Mhm.
doing part. And you talked about romanticizing it, and that while that is nice to conjure up these emotions and
Mhm.
well-being, feelings of well-being, but if you don't actually like the process, and I think I used an example of, if you've got the cigarette and the beret and you're doing all the things and you're studying the films, and if you're not actually making a film, then what you really love is the idea of the thing rather
Yeah.
than the thing. And
Yeah.
to truly fall in love and to truly be able to express your heart, what you need is to love the process.
Yeah.
And if you just think of what you just described, like, I love the process of breaking things down and what are
Mhm.
the simple ingredients and what are building blocks. So I think in a way that is absolutely fantastic advice that you've given is, for the folks that are wondering, like, what do you actually love spending your time with? And then
Yeah.
there's one other thing I want to poke at, which you talked about people, having people around you who support your ideas. And so how active did you have to be in, whether curating is a little bit of a snobby word, but in like deciding who you're going to hang out with, and
Mm.
did you have people that were not supportive along the way, and how were you able to navigate away from them? And if we think about it in the positive sense, are you able to gravitate towards people that
Yeah.
supported your ideas and lifted you up and said,
Yeah.
no, actually being a chef could be an amazing way to, live your life and express yourself, Julia. Go for it.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I don't know, I think my answer to that question just has evolved and continues to evolve. And I mean, as a young person, I don't know if I realized maybe how much agency I had in picking and choosing who was around me. And I think I had a lot less agency. Um, but I do think, I don't know, when I think back to my like young self and middle school and high school and stuff, like I I was always a person. I went to a very small school too, so this might, be part of it. But I feel like I was very friendly with everyone, but I wasn't particularly close to anyone. Like it took me a while to find, like, I would say my people, and by that I mean just people that I feel like I could be my just full self around. But that's not a dig at anyone I went to like high school with. I think that I didn't know my full self at that point. I don't know who does. And
Right.
it took me time to get to know me, which is something I continue to do every day. And the more I get to know myself and be open to how complicated and messy that person is, the more I find myself drawn to other people who are unafraid to be honest and open. And I enjoy that. And I find a lot of support in that. Not like direct support, like not like, I don't know, my parents are helping me put together like IKEA furniture support or like picking me up at the airport. Like that's wonderful. But like the kind of support I feel when I don't know. I feel like this is a different topic, but it's coming up for me as we're talking about this. But I think a lot of what I attempted to do in this book, you were showing the subtitle of the book. It's very surreal to see you holding the book. Like it's so new, right? Like I'm used to just like it's on my computer and now it's like,
I
oh my
got
gosh, people
one.
are holding it.
Nina.
Like this moment just does not get old, no matter how many books you work on. And I think something I tried to do in this book, it is a book of healthy comfort food. And I really tried to take a very wide, a very generous definition of those words. This is a healthy book that has nothing to do with weight loss. And we can get more into that if you want. But for me, I grew up in the magazine business, which is to say I grew up very much in diet culture. And that's something I've had a really hard time with. Be happy to talk about it more. But in me pushing against that and just detangling that for myself, I have a really helpful thing, which I think is applicable to any shift or change you're going through, career change or just, mindset change or value change, is changing what you consume in all forms, like not just food, but like the podcast I listen to, books I read. And I find support in those people, whether I know them or not. A lot of them, like changing who's like literally in your ear, like on your headphones. And for me, shifting out of diet culture has very much been, it feels to me like learning a new language. Like I was brought up speaking this language of like the best thing you could possibly is be is fat. That was like the language, the vocabulary. And now I feel like I'm learning this new language. And I think like learning any language, like the best thing is to immerse yourself in it. And so, I just yesterday on like my Instagram, I shared a bunch of these resources, books and podcasts and stuff that have been really helpful for me because I think, yeah, I love the logistics of like how do you find resources, but also within those resources is support. Like that's what resources are. It's support. It's like the scaffolding.
I think, no, that is amazing, and I appreciate you sharing. I want to go a little bit deeper on that because
Sure.
I think there's
Be happy to. Yeah.
it, these are ways in which and again, the folks who are listening and watching, you can easily lift and stamp this onto your own life. What I hear you say is like that was a part of what you were, the culture that you were raised in, and now bringing that new vocabulary, this
Hmm.
desire to be around it, like bringing that to food is actually your innovation. That is,
Mm.
that is a lens that you have that unique experience. And when I was saying earlier, like the personal essays and all
Hmm.
of the, like that
Yeah.
is what made this cookbook different for
Mm.
me than the other 40 that I have, above our kitchen. So to anyone listening or watching, like that is such sound advice. Like what's the
Mhm.
thing that that whether you think of this as a win or a loss, or it's a bag of bricks, or it's, the fuel for your fire. You're
Mhm.
carrying this with you, and you might as well,
Yeah.
double down on it. And I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but how does that feel when I say it?
Yeah. Oh, it totally lands. And I would say, I think I'm thinking about two things. One is, so I've had I would say pretty like unusual, not unheard of, but unusual experience of having both authored my own cookbooks, like a few of them, and I've also
Mhm.
collaborated with a ton of other people on their cookbooks. So I've been, a co-author and a project manager and all these different things. Um, so I have just helped put a lot of books into the world, not all of them mine. And the advice that if anyone asks me about the cookbook process or anyone I'm working with, if we're talking about it, I give the same advice everywhere. And it's the advice I try to follow myself, which is to only write the book that only you can write. And so for me, like Simply Julia is only a book that I only could have written because it is so personal and it does take years of my both passion for cooking, my love of it, the calm and confidence I feel when I'm cooking. I try to give that to my readers. I just feel like the world is really stressful and like you shouldn't feel stressed out in your kitchen. That's basically like my goal. But it also comes with my years of just experience of being a daily home cook and my years of experience of someone who's had like a difficult relationship with my body and just being honest about it in a healthy cookbook. So all of that is particular to me, but I'm not alone in any of that. So I
Yeah.
think that is big. And so that's one thing I'm thinking about when you bring that up. And the other thing is, I don't know, I'm just kind of having a moment here because I don't know, if we had this conversation a year ago or something, let alone longer than that, like, I don't think I could sit here as calmly as I am right now. Like my heart rate is not elevated. Like I feel very relaxed, very comfortable. I mean, you make me feel comfortable and safe, but also like I've worked through a lot of this stuff, and I for so long this conversation I would have been sweating. I would have been nervous. I would have maybe said like maybe we shouldn't have this conversation. Like it was something I felt like so much vulnerability around, like a lot of shame and guilt and all those kinds of things. And I think about that acceptance speech that Lena Waithe gave for, I can't
Mm.
remember what award it was,
Yes.
whatever, she should win all the awards. But when, she said that, the things that make us feel othered are like our superpowers, like I really identify with that. And I get that from the perspective of, I'm an openly gay woman. I write a ton about my wife. Um, that's really important to me. But also like sharing the stuff about my body and body image and stuff, like I felt so alone in it. I felt so like it's not something I could talk about. And I've really, the book has only just come out and I already feel this deep sense of connection with so many readers that isn't about the food. But I also think the food is the way in. I didn't write a memoir about body image, which there's nothing wrong with that. I've been so moved by like Roxane Gay's book Hunger changed my life,
Incredible.
along with
Incredible.
so many other people. I just think we need these messages everywhere. Diet culture is everywhere, fat phobia is everywhere. Like we need to push against it in so many different places. And I think cookbooks are welcomed in people's homes and lives in a way other types of media aren't. And I mean, one joke I make a lot, I don't know if it's funny, but I just always feel like, well, a cookbook is like, it's one of the only books you can read and it's going to end well. Like, no one's going to get hurt. um, so I just think weaving these messages in, like I'm a big fan of like Trojan horsing a lot of stuff through cookbooks.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, those are just some thoughts that came from what you just said. So.
But no, thank you so much again. And you said something, I'll grab the James Joyce quote that rang, which is like, in the particular lies the universal.
Mhm.
It's like this the thought that you are alone in anything is a reason to share it. And
Yeah.
once you do, the I think this is a recurring theme for the show. You talked about it. I've experienced it. As soon as you share what feels like the most vulnerable
Mhm.
aspects, that is a way to capture or reclaim some personal power, because you
Yeah.
realize that you're not alone. And
Yeah.
whether you're reclaiming personal power just to feel good about yourself or to advance your vision or mission for your life, or like it's that is there's a connectedness, and whether we like it or not, we're social animals, right? And so finding our path in this world and doing it through vulnerability and authenticity bringing all of those things, those stories that we have about our lives, true and false, along with us for the ride is
Mhm.
actually the ticket.
Yeah.
As you talked about, having experienced that with your work, that makes me want to talk about equity at the table.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Please, this is a project that well, I'll let you describe it, but please share with us. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
this is this beautiful idea that when you find this path that you're supposed to be on, how many interesting adjacencies come out. Like you mentioned Roxane Gay, who's been a guest on the show. She's a friend of Creative Live. Debbie Millman, her wife, and also guest on the show. I've been a guest on her podcast. Like, there's just so much.
It's all
Like,
in the family.
it is. It's interconnectedness, but you know, I'd love to hear this theme of when you're doing the thing, there's so many
Yeah.
amazing adjacencies that weave in and out of your life, which is why
Sure.
one of the reasons I want so many people to be doing the thing they're supposed to be doing on this planet, despite what their parents or career counselors or spouse says.
Yeah.
But this is, it seems like an interesting addition to your work. So talk to me about equity at
Yeah.
the table.
Sure. First, I'll just tell you what it is, and then I'll maybe share some thoughts about how it very much ties to all this if I can remember everything that's on my mind right now, because you just like really sparked a lot. So, Equity at the Table is a website, equityattetable.com. You can, go to it right now if you'd like. It started in April of 2018, so it's coming up on its third birthday, I guess. I'm just realizing. And so, Equity at the Table is a digital directory, it's a database. I started it that April. I started it with a wonderful advisory board and a web developer. It was very much inspired by another website that I imagine is on your radar. And if it's not, I am happy to put it on your radar, called Women Who Draw, which is a digital directory of illustrators. And it's amazing, an amazing resource. And so Equity at the Table is a database for women and gender nonconforming and non-binary individuals in the food world. The food world is a huge umbrella term. There are so many industries within the food industry, and it is a place that very much prioritizes and champions anyone who identifies as, a Black or Indigenous person of color, or and/or is part of the queer community. And there's also resources for those people, but it's an incredibly simple website to navigate, and you can look people up by not just their profession, and people can choose whichever professions they identify with. You can also look them up by location, and we have members all over the world, I think in every state. And you can also look up, you know, and you can look up combinations of these things. You can also look up by how people identify. So whether that is by, you know, just like their background or race or whatever it might be. And the reason I wanted to start it was because I was looking for a site like it and I couldn't find it. And being the recipe writer I am, I just, and I love lists and organizing things. I just thought it would be like a pretty simple thing to build. I am not a tech person. I worked with someone great to do that. It wasn't as simple as I had thought, but no matter. I'm super happy it exists. It is free to join and free to use, and it will always be those things that has nothing to do with money. I'm not trying to sell
No,
it. Like,
Megacorp Inc. is
yeah.
not behind it.
And it is really something that is rooted completely in community and not capitalism. And, I've been asked a lot, like, well, what's the next step for it? And how are you going to scale it? And I'm like, no, it's a database. Like, that's what it is and what it always will be. So that's sort of one interesting thing. And then I think, to kind of tie into what you brought up before, two thoughts come to mind. One is, so everyone submits a picture, and it can be a picture of them or something they feel represents them. I know not everyone wants to put, their face on the internet. Um, and within all of those images, and when you go to the site, you can just scroll and scroll, and the site randomizes. So, you're not seeing the same people each time you open it. And there is a tremendous amount of power in just the visual representation of seeing this many faces and names who belong to categories that have been so othered for so long within the food
Mhm.
industry, within all industries. And I think it really speaks to the power of just the mindset of going from like scarcity mindset to abundance. Something I've heard over and over in my 15 years of working cookbooks is like, well, I just don't know any, I don't know, Black person who works in pastry or something. Or like, where am I supposed to find someone who's Indigenous who knows about, you know, certain foodways, or, and on, someone living with a disability. And there's that. So this makes it very undeniable. Like, no, there's so many of us, like multiple options. So there's that. And I think also, I think scarcity mentality, which, you know, is so interwoven with capitalism, and I think is so against all the stuff that is so wonderful about creativity.
Yeah.
I think it really puts us in a position where we are just constantly comparing ourselves to each other, constantly feeling like, well, if this person's doing this, then there's not room for me to do it. And, you know, the kind of guiding principle of equity at the table, the like aphorism that's, you know, on the website that like inspired the whole thing, is that it's just better to build longer tables instead of higher fences. And I think that equity at the table really shows just what abundance looks like. And the other thought that comes to mind is, you know, when I started it, the way I was the way I thought success for the website would be measured would be in how many people were hired from it or featured, you know, how many jobs or, you know, connections it would create between basically like gatekeepers and members of the website. So magazine editors or conference organizers, you know, people who have podcasts and shows and stuff, like who are they booking? And what I've come to understand, and it's been such a powerful lesson for me, is that the other, you know, that's super important. It's definitely a measurement of success. I love hearing, you know, oh, I, you know, got this job through someone reaching out to me this way. But the other unit of measurement, the other barometer that I have come to just so embrace is how much connection members have had with each other and the community come out of this database. And that to me is just such an important unit of measurement, just using community as currency
Yeah.
more than anything else. And, you know, for people to know that they're not alone in doing what they do, you know, again, coming back to like, as I was talking about with diet culture and all that stuff, like it's just, I just think not feeling alone is really important. And I think a lot of the creative work that we all have the potential to make can really foster connection in that way that just leaves us feeling less isolated, which I just think is really crucial.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying all of that, and also for making the thing. I think that's another theme from the show is we all have an
Hmm.
anticipation of some of the value or some of the benefit that our work can be in the world, but you never actually know. And just the
Yeah.
idea of, you thought that the measure of success was going to be, getting jobs and, hiring, and but what you really realize is it's community, and or even, pulled back a little bit, just it's so hard to be what you can't see. And if you
Yeah,
can
totally.
provide a picture of, no, no, you're not alone, look how many other people are in
Hmm.
this, we're in this together. I think that's so valuable, and just a consistent and effective reminder that whether the work that you do affects two people or 10 or 10 million, is it, you don't know until you do the work.
Yeah,
That's a
totally.
reason to do it in and of itself.
Yeah.
So
And I think something else you're pointing to that just feels really important to me personally is, you know, the value you just might not even know you're adding. And, you know, when I put out my first solo cookbook, which was called Small Victories, you know, I had worked on a bunch of other books with all sorts of different people, but I had never put out my own book and promoted it. And I thought my measurement of success, make dinner tonight. You know, like that felt really important to me. Like, how
yeah,
many books can I sell? Like, those were the things that were kind of drilled into me. Like, this is how you measure your worth. Like, what's your Amazon ranking and all this stuff that I frankly just no longer care so much about. And what happened to me when I put out that book that I just didn't know would happen was, as I mentioned, I talk about my wife so much because I talk about what I cook at home, and it's my home is me, my wife, and our two dogs. So like they come up a lot, and I I cannot tell you. I'm not saying this in like a braggy way. I'm saying this in a way that I'm just so moved by this. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had over the years with like especially young queer women, but all sorts of members of the queer community, when they tell me what it means to see, you know, me as a woman use the word wife over and over in something as just ordinary as a cookbook, you know, and it has just led to so much connection. And, that I think is part of what made me feel so safe and encouraged to include more of myself in this new book and Simply Julia than I have in the past, because I've been met with that kind of response, and it is truly so powerful. And I didn't plan it. And I think if I had planned it or gone looking for it, like, I don't know if I would have found it. Like, I think sometimes you have to make the work that's true to you to find out, what comes on the boomerang, like, back to you. Yeah.
So often we want to see the whole staircase, right? But you can only
Yeah.
just see a couple of stairs, and
Yeah.
it's in doing that work and taking those steps that
Totally.
the boomerang can come back to you. Um, well, again, thank you so much for sharing those insights. I feel like that is embedded in the work, and you can just feel it when you feel like, why are you attracted to a particular film or story or podcast, or and in this case your books. It's like that is so, it's like so um, present.
Mm.
So thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Thank you.
And well, let's throw a equityatthetable.com is
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
to go, right?
Yep.
For if you want to learn a little bit more about that,
Yeah.
have access to that database. And you also mentioned your Instagram handle. I would like to get that in here too. So
Sure. Yeah.
um,
It is just my last name at Turshen. And
Turshen for those
you
who
got it.
are out there, and it's awesome and beautiful, and it's fun to hear. Again, you've put so much into it. Um, but I also I want to dive into food for a second.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
know
Of course. Of
part
course.
of the benefit of the show is that we get to talk about so many things. And for example, your creativity, your process, your history, all that is just, it's part of what makes us hopefully a rich conversation for folks listening and watching. And yet, as a
And there's
food
recipes.
as a food person, and as someone who, thought the idea of healthy, I like to consider myself a relatively healthy, mindful person, and loving comfort food for the emotions and the connections and the,
Mhm.
again, we're social animals, and it doing such a nice job of bringing us together. I want to talk about food for a minute here.
Of course.
um, why comfort food,
Mhm.
and how did you start with the healthy and then decide that that comfort food was an underrepresented uh, population in the food universe, or how did you
Yeah.
arrive at the concept of
Yeah.
healthy and comfort food? Because frankly, it's exactly what I was looking for, and as
Awesome.
I mentioned, we're already cooking out of it. And Julie, who's the producer of the show, was saying earlier how much she's cooking out of it. How'd you come up with the concept,
Sure.
and talk us through your creative process about the recipes that are
Yeah.
in the book?
So I am about to just talk about my wife a bunch. um,
Great.
so I basically felt, I mentioned I worked on other books, and I felt like I had another in me, and I felt like that was that feeling was propelled by just the fact that I've been a daily home cook for a very long time, and I do a lot of volunteering in my community, like through food, and I just have a lot of things I make that I feel like other people would like, basically. And when it came time to really hone in on what that is and how to describe it, I was having a really hard time doing that because I love food from so many different parts of the world, from so many different places. Again, stories attached to all of it. And I just didn't know what is the simplest way to describe that. And I was going on and on, coming up with different titles and subtitles, and just I couldn't wrap my head around it. And as you can maybe tell by how I'm describing it, I just like had a hard time coming up with one or two words. And so I was saying this to Grace, and she was like, Julia, like, enough already. You make healthy comfort food. Like, that's what you make. Like, if you specialize in anything, that's what it is. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So
Write that
sometimes,
down quick,
yeah,
quick.
yeah, sometimes it takes like having someone who, that moment where you're like, for me it's my wife, but it could be your friend or your parent or your child, whatever. But like when you have someone close to you who, like, in certain moments it's like, oh, they're seeing me a lot clearer than I am right now. Like, it was very much that kind of thing. So once I had this sort of healthy comfort food thing, it just all clicked into place because it helped me, it put a frame around all the stuff that I was having trouble organizing. And the minute I had the framework, it all felt much easier to put into place. So that's kind of where that came from. And then in terms of themselves and how they're organized, we've talked so much, and I so appreciate talking so much about how personal this book is, but it's also at the same time absolutely the most practical book I've ever written. These are the simplest recipes, the easiest, but also the way they're organized is very much a response to basically the most frequently asked questions I've received over the last few years of being someone who puts out a ton of, different cookbooks. I speak to people on social media. I speak to my friends and family. Like I speak to my dad all the time about what he's cooking. He's always like, I don't know what this thing is in the freezer. Like, what do you think I should do with it? Like, that's a very frequent conversation. So the book kind of responds to those questions. So there's things like, there's a whole chapter of vegan one pot meals because I think a lot of people are, trying to eat more plants and all that stuff, but, don't want to just eat pasta primavera over and over. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but, to have some more things, but really easy one pot, easy cleanup. There's a whole chapter of like really delicious but super simple like salad dressings and like easy sauces you can just throw on a bowl of greens or like a rotisserie chicken from the store, or, grill of this or that, like super, super easy. Just make it a little bit more special, make it more fun. The chapters really are about that. There's a chapter of just all chicken recipes. It's like the most Googled thing. But I also think like there's something about creating a cookbook where the thing that I am trying to create all the time as best I can, whether it's being honest in a conversation like the one we're having, or like putting a lot of thought into how I write the recipes, like I'm just trying to establish as much trust as I can. Like I want someone to know if they open my book, you can trust like, A, you're in a safe space. Like I'm super honest here. Like I want you to feel comfortable. And B, like if you make my recipe, like it's going to turn out and it will become your recipe. Like my goal is for you to make it so many times, like it becomes you forget even maybe where it came from, like that kind of feeling. So yeah, trust just feels very important to me. Yeah.
Well, the hard questions come from the audience, not for me. I'm here to have a conversation, but Susan is asking the tough question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite?
The favorite recipe.
I hate anytime I'm interviewed. I hate being asked anything with the superlative, right? Your favorite song, the best movie. It was just like wither under the pressure. So try and feel no pressure, but maybe talk about some favorites.
Yeah. How about I give you a couple, right? Okay.
Great.
I mean, they're all my favorites. I can't pick a favorite, but there's some I really love. Okay. The first recipe in the book, I'll hold this up so you can see it.
God, that is so beautiful.
Okay. This is my friend Yuba's recipe that she gave me for Yuba's green spaghetti. This is such a great recipe because you don't have to chop anything. So your box of spaghetti. I use whole wheat spaghetti because healthy, yes, but also like it tastes really nutty and it stands up to this really robust sauce really well. So for me, flavor is like the most important thing. And the sauce is fresh, raw spinach and kale. You put in a blender with some garlic and a little cream cheese and a little feta cheese. So you get like a little creamy, a little salty. And
my stomach literally just growled. If the microphone was like maybe a little bit lower, you would have heard my stomach growl when you said that.
I'm so happy to hear that. And it basically looks like you've made like a green smoothie, but I mean, it tastes better than any green smoothie you've had. You pour it over the pasta. That's it. One pot. That's it. This is another favorite. These stewed chickpeas with peppers and zucchini.
So beautiful,
this is in the one pot vegan meal chapter. This recipe was born out of Grace and I volunteer. I mentioned we do some community stuff. We volunteer at a place near us called Angel Food East, which is kind of like a local Meals on Wheels program. And in the summer, local farmers donate like crates and crates of zucchini and peppers. And we're always trying to make a meal like quickly, easily, healthfully, and cheaply. Like all of the ingredients in my book are very affordable, very available. Like that feels very important to me in terms of healthy food. Like it shouldn't cost a fortune. It shouldn't be hard to find. So that recipe, you basically throw those things in one pot and then you make this like really delicious sauce you can use a vegan mayo or regular if you're not vegan, a little garlic and parsley, and you just drizzle that on. It can stay in your refrigerator forever. It's like surprisingly good for how easy it is, which is like my favorite kind of thing. And maybe, should I show you one dessert?
Yes.
Okay. Um, okay, I'm gonna show. This is hard to choose, but yeah, there's all these super easy desserts. This is this cobbler. So this cobbler is it's the any frozen fruit and cornmeal cobbler, and it's called that. I mean, just literally because you can use any type of frozen fruit, which again, easy. Like frozen fruit is picked when it's ripe. It's like frozen immediately, so it tastes really good. It's also cleaned and peeled and pitted and chopped. Like peeling
Yeah.
peaches is so hard. They're so slippery. you know? So this you mix it like right in the baking dish. You don't even need to like dirty, many bowls. The topping is just like cornmeal and flour, like a tiny bit of sugar just to make it sweet, a little half and half, but you could use buttermilk or whatever you want. And it's just so easy. Like a kid can make it and it's so good. And it's again, surprisingly good for how easy it is. I think that's like
Well, that's the level. Maybe this is why I'm so attracted to your work, because that's the level that I fly at. Like, what
that's
is,
great. Yep.
how can it be easy and good? And also, we've talked there's two separate points I want to make, but they're related here. One, the beauty of the food, and we're in a pandemic, so it's difficult to host and get to share a lot of what I make in my kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's different for some folks elsewhere, but uh, and yet when I still feel the feeling when I'm making something of the beauty in it if I see it. And
Yeah.
when you set that in front of someone else, that is, that's a part of the experience. You mentioned the flavor is the most important thing to you, which is, great. We can stack rank these important things, but I'm very visual. So when I set, a beautiful steak that I've just done in a French style in the cast iron skillets
Mm-hmm.
in front of someone there, you're like, wow, like that is a beautiful thing. And you just slice it up. And so many, I mean, obviously you're making cookbooks, so you make food look beautiful for a living basically. But I was just shocked and like so impressed and motivated and excited. But it also makes me want to mention Melina Hammer, who
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
is you're a co-conspirator with you, and did she photograph the whole book or just parts of the book or
So she
most of the book?
photographed all the food. There are also a lot of like old family photos in the
Mhm.
book. So obviously those came from, albums and stuff behind me. And another photographer, Winnie, who's awesome. She shot the cover of the book and a couple portraits. So we did that one day. But yeah, Melina is amazing. Yeah.
Well, she just as an FYI, she is going to be a guest. We at Creative Live have
Oh, cool.
another podcast called We Are Photographers,
Yeah.
and to sort of pair with this, we've got Melina
Fantastic.
coming on our We Are Photographer podcast to talk about photographing this. So
I'm so happy to hear that because it's quite a story.
it is,
Yeah.
yeah. It's what a massive endeavor. So when we're talking, you've mentioned a couple of the chapters of the book, like all about chicken and the vegan one pot. Um, I have two specific questions that are related to my challenge.
Yeah,
One
please.
one is referenced in the book, and the other is not. So I'm going to ask it. The one that
Okay.
we'll start with the one that's referenced in the book, where this is a selfish chase question here.
Yeah, no
You
problem.
talk about
Your show.
pre-made main dishes,
Uh-huh.
or like, and to me that is where I always blow up, is if I can't, I end up, I can't forecast what I'm going to want, or like
Mm,
just this um making it so that I'm not completely time pressured, and where cooking is not fun,
mhm.
versus like just getting some stuff ready or having it handy. And so I was fascinated by that chapter because it satisfies. I realize that that's where some like frustration uh, or anxiety comes in hosting others.
Sure.
So even
Yeah.
if it's just like meal planning for my wife Kate and I,
Yeah.
like, or me, talk to me about
Yeah.
that.
So that chapter, all like make ahead main dishes,
Hmm.
that chapter is there because I think sometimes making something ahead just makes everything much easier. I'm thinking about something like a big holiday meal in the
Yep.
before times when we have a lot of people over and stuff. Like to me, like something like Thanksgiving, or like my family is Jewish, we have a big Passover Seder, like making these big holiday meals, they stress everyone out so much. And I always just think about what's the best part of Thanksgiving? It's like all the leftovers you eat on Friday, right? So like therefore all that food tastes really good when it's warmed up the next day. So like you can make it all ahead. Like you don't have to stress out because I don't think that I really I know that I'm saying this based on a lifetime of home cooking. So it's, I know some of this is easier for me than other people, but I just really believe that there's no element of like a holiday meal that is so difficult to make. The thing that is so difficult is timing it. I think that's where the pressure comes in and the urgency, like the false urgency. And so I just think when you can just do yourself a favor, do yourself the favor. So like if you
Yeah.
can make something ahead, do it. And there's a lot of food that I don't think you can just get away with making ahead. I think it tastes even better if you do. So like anything that's like stewed or braised or slowly cooked, like all those things taste better if they've like been in a container in the fridge for a day or two. So if you know you're having people over, or if you want to meal plan, um, or if you just have like, I don't know, a couple hours on like a Sunday afternoon and you don't feel like answering your emails that you plan to get through or whatever, and you just want to, have like a productive procrastination, like you can make like a braised pork shoulder and you can put it into containers or Ziploc bags and freeze portions of it. And then like on a Tuesday night when you're super busy and you forgot that, you have to eat or something. I mean, that's never happened to me, but I've heard that happens.
I've heard that happens.
Like you can pull out your little Ziploc bag of the pork, run it under some warm water and, heat it up in a pan and eat it, make some quick tacos or something. Like I just think there's a lot of joy to be found in the calmness that comes with just making things ahead when you have the time to do it and you're not rushed and forced. So yeah, that's a little
I
bit more about
I
that.
find I not only do I eat the best, but I it's the most joyful experience when I've planned a little bit and I
Hmm.
have some of those things that I
Yeah.
can just sort of pull out and get what would be like an unreasonably amazing thing on a
Hmm.
Tuesday night when I've only
Exactly.
got like 20 minutes to
Yeah,
get some food in me or something.
totally. That's a
Okay,
great feeling.
so again, that's an amazing chapter, and we're seeing Rosemary De La Rosa just joined here, and our live broadcast is asking the title again.
Mm.
I'm here with Julia talking about her new book, Simply Julia. Um, Now, so that was point one. My
Hmm.
selfish questions here. This
Yeah,
is
yeah, go for
the
it.
benefits of being the host. Now, the second, I'm just going to show you a picture on my phone that I snapped right before
Okay.
we started recording, which I don't know if you can see that,
I
but
see
that's
fruit or
we
potatoes.
this is it's basically leftover CSA. So we order
Okay.
from a local farm,
Yeah.
and grocery bags full of stuff show up.
Hmm.
And in this case, you got squashes and potatoes and onions, and I think there's some what are those things with the little seeds inside of them? Um, what are those things called? You crack them open. No, that's an apple. Never mind. But yeah, but there's that mound of
Uh-huh.
food on this little tray that we've got that sits in the corner of our kitchen,
Uh-huh.
and it's like it is everything under the sun, and I
Yeah.
can't like I'm not I'm I don't like to waste things.
Yeah.
So, and I'm guessing I'm not alone. In the
Yeah.
particular lies the
Yeah.
universal, right? I'm guessing that there's a lot of people. You go to the grocery store, you buy a bunch of stuff, you
Yeah.
realize at the end of the week, all this stuff is about to go bad. And I
Hmm.
feel horrible and guilty. And I want to make it and maybe put it in those containers and put it in that,
Hmm.
like, help me
Yeah.
solve this problem.
Yeah.
How should I start to think about the everything under the sun menu that comes after you've, like, what are the
Yes.
leftovers of my, my farm delivery?
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked this because I think this is a situation a lot of people get into, especially people who, you know, are drawn to something like a healthy cookbook and,
Mhm.
maybe they want to buy a ton of produce or support their local farm. Like a CSA is an awesome thing to do. It's so wonderful. Super quickly for anyone who doesn't know what Chase is talking about, like community supported agriculture. It's like got history in like black farmers. It's like an amazing thing, and many small farms across the country do it. You give the farmer money up front, and then throughout the season you get produce, but you don't often get to choose exactly what it is. It's like farmer's choice, which can be stressful because sometimes you get like 10 pounds of onions. But it's also, I find it wonderful because I love the creative challenge of like
Yes.
figuring it out. I love that. And basically, I will give you advice for maybe the next time you pick up your share, like what I do when I pick up my share, and also advice for the picture you showed me and what's on your counter. And so I guess in the
A
opposite
lot of
order.
potatoes and
Yeah.
apples and
For the
garlic
stuff,
and
yeah.
squash
For
and
the stuff you already have, I mean, that all sounds really like kind of like fall vegetables, like root vegetables, that kind of stuff. Everything you just named, if you can just scrub it, you don't have to peel any of it, and cut it into pieces, and all of those things tossed with some olive oil and salt, and put it on sheet pans and roast it in a 425 oven. Like, you can't go wrong. Like, all those things will be great, and you can mix them together, you can do it separate, whatever you want. And I'm a big fan of doing, as opposed to, actually get quite stressed out with the idea of meal planning, because I try to eat very intuitively, and I don't know what I'm going to be in the mood for 3 nights from today.
yeah.
But I like basically putting a lot of stuff in my kitchen that I know I like and that I can turn into other things. So, you know, when I pick up my CSA share and there's a ton of potatoes, I'll do what I just told you. I'll roast a ton of them. And then, maybe that night, Grace and I will have like roast chicken with roast potatoes, and I'll make like a little tahini sauce or something really delicious. And then the next morning or 2 days later, maybe I'll cut up an onion and cook it and add the roasted potatoes that are already cooked, they're already done, and we'll have like delicious homemade hash browns. We'll have those in the morning with some greens and egg or something. So I'll keep the big batch
Sounds
thing
so
like
good.
simple.
It just
But I
sounds
think
so
it's
good.
but keeping the big amount of whatever you're cooking really simple, so that you can dress it up later, and you can, you're not eating the same thing over and over. You're not making like a huge pot of chili and just having it every night, which there's nothing wrong with, and I'd be happy to do that. But like, I think giving yourself the flexibility to, add a different spice or sauce is really helpful. And then I try to, when I pick up my CSA, so next time, so you don't end up with like the tray of stuff where something is kind of going moldy, and you spent this money and it's all this fresh stuff, but you can't get to it in time. I try to, this doesn't always happen, but I try to build in time when I pick up my share for like an hour or two afterwards. Like, I want to, like, we got spinach in our CSA share this week. Spinach, like, it takes up this much room in your fridge, and when you cook it, it takes up this much room. So when I bring it home, I immediately wash it and I cook it, and I'll put it in the fridge, even if it's just like steamed or cooked with like a little garlic or something, and I'll put it in a container. And then, like, it takes up less room. We have a small fridge, so that's important to me, but it also means like I've already cleaned it and prepped it, and so then throughout the week, until we get our next share, it's so much easier for me to grab a container of like garlicky spinach and, put it into an omelet or eat it on some rice with like some soy sauce or something. Like, I will do that, as opposed to like, oh, like I have to wash this stuff and cook it. Like, that just feels draining to me. So taking the time up front to like set yourself up for success, like build in a little time to like clean things, chop them, put it like in a Ziploc, just make it easier for yourself.
This makes me feel good and not alone that even
Oh,
you
you're not
can
alone.
say, I don't want to have to do all that
Oh
stuff
yeah.
every time. No, but I will, that makes me feel good. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm guessing there are people out there who are similar to me, and whether it's CSA or just stuff that you don't want to go bad, this
Mm,
idea of roasting vegetables has been huge. So
yeah.
that's Kate and I do that. We chop and we also don't go too crazy. We chop a bunch of vegetables and 425 of them, just a huge. Sometimes we'll do two
Yeah.
completely full baking pans or baking pans. What are those things called?
Like the sheet pans.
Sheet pan, yeah.
Same thing.
And
Whatever.
yeah, I don't know. I don't want to step in it here, but
Or not.
and toss them with olive oil and salt and 425 them. It's like you spatula them up a couple of times throughout
Hmm.
their roasting process, and they feel like Lego bricks. They're like,
Hmm.
we eat them with a big piece of meat,
Hmm.
and then the next day we'll they'll be alongside an omelet, and then for dinner the following night, well, gosh, we're going to steam some halibut, and so this idea of creating building blocks is
Hmm.
one of the things that I noticed was in your answer right there is just inherent in the answer. Like, you're bringing these things along, and you just add a thing, and they're a little bit different. You put them next to a different main or in
Yeah.
some eggs or um, so thank you for
Yeah.
solving two of my.
No,
Now everyone knows
you're very
Chase's
welcome. And
personal.
no, I'm really glad you asked, because to me, what you're talking about is just daily home cooking, where,
Mhm.
you know, not everything has to be a recipe in a cookbook. Like, sometimes I just want like toast. And
Yeah.
sometimes, like, like I make a lot of like things like hummus and stuff like that I keep in the fridge, and like I'll roast that tray of vegetables, and sometimes I'll just have like a piece of toast with like some hummus and those vegetables on top. That is like so good. It's so satisfying. And if I have the bread on the counter, the hummus, you don't have to make it. and the roasted vegetables in the fridge, like that takes less than 5 minutes. That's such a good meal. It makes me feel like I'm taking care of myself. It makes me feel good. And like that's very valuable. And I just feel like when it comes to cooking at home and eating, like we have the chance every single to take care of ourselves. That's a wonderful opportunity.
Awesome. Couple of speed round questions here
Yeah,
coming in
please.
from
Yeah.
around the world. Alan's asking if that thing I was trying to name earlier was a pomegranate. Yes, that was the thing I was thinking and didn't have the words for. Um, Lynn saying hello from Esperado, California. So questions around avocado oil or compressed extra virgin olive oil. Do you have a preference, and if so, why?
Sure. I am an olive oil girl. I use it on everything. It's like pretty much the only oil I keep in my house. And yeah, I toss things in it to roast. I make salad dressings. I use it in baking a lot. Like I love like an olive oil cake, or I fry eggs in it. I'm on team olive oil. And I really love this is not like sponsored, but I really love California Olive Ranch. I think they're like they produce their olive oil in a very like great way, which not every company does, and like very
Mhm.
environmentally like aware. And I think for the quality of the oil and the price, it's a really good product.
Questions from the community about gluten-free options. And you mentioned, flour and how you like it, and
Hmm.
so much of I think there's a whole 10 episodes we could talk about gluten and its history and why you know it's different in America than in other countries.
Hmm.
Cake can eat bread in France, and you just walk by a bread here in the United States, and she gets basically she has a reaction. That's
Hmm.
a separate question, but
Yeah.
as you talked earlier about vegan and one pot, and seems like there's a radical sort of utility and practicality to all of your work. How, if someone has some food intolerances, can you
Hmm.
give some just general advice on how to think about
Sure.
that?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, within my family, just between my wife, my in-laws, my brother, my sister-in-law, like just between that group of people, there's like one type 1 diabetic, one type 2 diabetic, one severe allergy to like wheat and soy, one vegan, like, and that's just in that small group. So, accommodating different dietary needs is something that I think about a lot, just like not just as a cookbook author, but just as like a person. So that's why all the recipes in my book are just like incredibly flexible. And of the 110 recipes in the book, I counted 106 of them are gluten free or can be made very easily to be gluten free. Because I know it is something a lot of people suffer from. And I just basically feel like my advice around it is that if you can eat anything, or but you're cooking for someone who can't, I just really like making food feel very inclusive and not making like a separate thing for someone. Like I like making something everyone can enjoy, whatever the issues are. So I think just having that kind of spirit of inclusivity is nice. So that's sort of my emotional response to it. But like on a practical level, um, I would say there's I think Cup for Cup is a great brand of like all-purpose gluten-free flour that works really, really well, and you can use that pretty interchangeably in most recipes. And I think also like lean towards things that are just inherently gluten-free as opposed to like trying to find all sorts of, weird
Alternatives, or yeah,
substitutes.
yeah.
Yeah, like like there's a recipe for these really delicious, like really, really delicious, like cheesy ranch grits, like all the flavors and spices you find in ranch dressing because ranch dressing is delicious. And corn is not wheat, like it's inherently gluten free. It's a delicious thing. So I think just leaning into things that just you know are exactly what they are, and you're not looking for a substitute. You're just celebrating things that make your body feel good. So yeah, those are some thoughts.
Amazing. Like Everett, and it is virtually universal in the comments that I'm seeing here. Damn, I'm hungry. Okay, I'm off to dinner. The European folks are eating dinner now. Hakan, damn, this is a great conversation. I'm getting very, very hungry. So thank you for making us all hungry.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
And
Occupational hazard.
your stories of food, the essays that you bring about your personal life into your work, um, they truly differentiate you and your work from the other cookbooks that I,
Oh, thank
still
you.
enjoy and have on my shelf.
Yeah.
But um, so thank you again for making this a personal experience for us to connect with you, the work. Again, if you are just tuning in now because we're live, you have just missed an amazing conversation. I'm I'm
Sorry.
sitting here with Julia Turshen and her new book, Simply Julia, which dropped yesterday. And if it's anything like your others and the all of the New York Times accolades and that you have received will be a chart topper. And it seems like, I don't know if the rest of the world is also like me, but I'm cooking a heck of a lot more these days, being inside and
Yeah.
cooking for smaller, just for my immediate family and less hosting. And so it's been an amazing area of creativity and exploration. But before we go, I'm hoping to get a what do you see in the future of how the pandemic has affected the kitchen and
Mm.
convening? And I can see it cutting both ways, and as someone who lives you know this a life around food and cooking and recipes, and I got to think that you've got a point of view on this, and just curious, what do you see emerging from this time?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm just as ready as everyone else for this time to be over. And so many people have had, gone through so many struggles and challenges. But I also think like I don't know, I can only speak for myself. Uh, I've learned a lot of things over this past year that I really hope to carry with me and have been very valuable lessons that I wish weren't at the expense they were. One of those things is just really acknowledging what a hard time this is, and that the last thing we need to associate with food is like stress or guilt. And I think those things come up for people with food a lot for various reasons. And I think
Mhm.
simple food is really good, and you shouldn't have any anxiety to make yourself or your loved ones a meal. And eating food you love and that makes you feel good, like that should never feel guilty. And I hope that we carry that with us. And, I'm not the person to ask about food trends or what's next. I have no idea. Like, I don't
Yeah,
pay attention to it.
I'm
Yeah.
about the psychological
Yeah.
and the emotional part. That's
Yeah.
really what I'm
Yeah.
pressing at here.
So I think just like really embracing like simple is valuable, and like yeah, they're just when we feel our healthiest, it should have nothing to do with like restriction or guilt. Like it should feel pleasurable and joyous and fun. So yeah.
Yeah, and just final word around creativity.
Hmm.
So it seems like this is such as an advocate for creativity, and when I like found it in one part of my life and started to like try and um unleash it in the other
Hmm.
areas of my life, I felt like the quality of my life overall went up. And
Mm,
that comes with mistakes, that comes with failures, that comes with
totally.
some ruined pancakes every once in a while.
Yeah, totally.
And so talk to me a little bit about how you think, and maybe release a little bit of the stigma that aspiring pretend chefs like myself and others listening, when we really mess up, like, what is this a is this a how should we think about it? Because
Yeah,
clearly you've had to make a lot of mistakes on your way to the greatness that you've
yeah.
experienced.
Oh, yeah. I've like, you know, like you said, every batch of pancakes, there's always the first pancake. And just knowing that's part of it, like, meanwhile, I'll eat all the pancakes. Like, that's fine. Um, but I think I appreciate what you just said before about during the pandemic and being at home more. And, those of us lucky to just be able to just stay safely at home.
Yeah.
Um, cooking more. And I heard that when you were saying that you said you found it's a place where you can be creative. And I really love that. And I think that the kitchen is a pretty, like, at the end of the day, I don't know, there's a lot of pressure put on cooking, a lot of pressure put on food. But at the end of the day, the kitchen is like a pretty low stakes environment. Like if you burn the pancakes, like, if you have the ingredients, you can make another batch, you can order a pizza, you can, like it's just dinner. Like I say that all the time. All the time I'm like, it's just dinner or it's just lunch or breakfast, whatever. Like how lucky are we that like there will be another meal? Like, and I also just feel like every meal we eat doesn't have to be the best meal we've ever had. Like I don't know, this morning I had cornflakes for breakfast. We have them in our house. I was craving them and it like hit the spot. It was so good. Like I didn't want a fancy breakfast. You know, some mornings I wake up and I'm like, I wish I was in a hotel and I could just order room service. Sometimes I just want cornflakes, and that's fine. So I think knowing just if you are a creative person, which I believe we all are, like the kitchen is a place where we can remind ourselves of that. And we also have the safety to like not get it right every time. And that's really valuable. And it's nice to have a place that's so accessible. Like most of us have a kitchen in our lives, and that's a place where we can like remember that and remember it's like okay not to get it right. Cause I think that's not something we hear a lot or get reminded of. And like, we can't get it right each time. Like that's impossible. So just forget it.
Amazing. Well, Saul chiming in here. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
There you go.
Anna, thanking us so much for the conversation. Rosemary, that food should feel pleasurable. Love that. So grateful. Susan, simple is how she likes to roll as well. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Others. Lynn wants to give a double shout out for supporting California olive oil. We got folks coming in from all over saying thank you, and I want to extend a personal thank you. Take a moment and say, I see your work as extraordinary. I'm grateful to have had you as a guest on the show. And my goal is to spread your work far and wide. The book, congratulations. It's dropped. It's incredible. It's
Thank you so much.
gorgeous. And yeah, there's a copy of your book in Seattle in my hands right now. And it's just, I can smell the fresh ink, and it's already got some greasy fingerprints here. So
The best compliment. Yeah.
just want to say thank you from our community, and thank you for joining us. Congratulations on the work. Anywhere you'd steer us, or what's the best way in addition to buying the book? And especially I want to speak to the community here this week. Like, let's support Julia for when we can to pick up a copy of her book. Doing so right when it comes out is always helpful for the authors. But where else would you steer us on the
Sure.
internet? And we've talked about a couple of your different projects, but anything else that you could direct if you had to ask of our
Yeah.
community?
I will just quickly just I don't know that I have the right words, but just thank you for everything you just said. I just don't want to go without saying that. It really means a lot to me, and I just value the thoughtfulness that you brought to this, you know, your questions and this conversation. And I really enjoy this. So just
Mm.
thank you. This was really pleasurable, and so that and thank you about asking where to get the work. So yeah, buying the book is fantastic. You know, and I hope it's fantastic for you. I hope you get so much use out of it. I would say one of the best ways to support the work in the way that I would most love to be supported is to buy it from, you know, your local independent bookstore. Like bookstore owners are just, you know, anchors of communities, and it's so important to support them. So please seek them out. And I think a really helpful thing to do for me for this book, but for any author, is also just taking the minute to leave like a review on places, even if you whether or not you buy the book there, like that makes a huge difference, and I appreciate that. And yeah, where else to lead people? You can find everything about me and my work at I have a website, juliaturshen.com. It's just my name, and I have a podcast as well, so you can find all that there. You know, like I love conversations like this, so if you want more of those, so it's all there. Everything about the book. You know, if you want a signed copy, you can get it there. It's all there. So yeah,
And the podcast, Keep Calm and Cook On.
yeah. I
Awesome.
couldn't resist.
It's awesome. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Julia. Grateful for your time and for being for showing up for us here who are trying to learn something about cooking and food and the role that it plays in a rich life. So appreciate you. I hope you have an amazing day. Congrats on the book, and signing off for our community. Until next time, we bid you adieu.